Now with our patterning laid in for the entirety of the complementary ring, we can label with our hue, tints, and shades, and then we're ready to paint this. So typically the thing that I tell everybody in class is that no matter how difficult this painting may end up looking, just because you get so many little detail areas in this, no matter how difficult it may end up looking, we're going to simplify it by turning it into our own version of a paint by numbers or a paint by letters. Since we're not going to use numbers in here, we're going to use letters for the different colors that we have, and that's going to help to remind us where the hue of my first color is going to go, where the hue of my second color is going to go, so on and so forth. Now, when I mark these, I'm going to mark them in a very specific way. So starting in A1 and looking at the colors that I have, red and green, I'm going to begin with my first complementary color. And not only am I going to begin with the first complementary color, I'm going to begin with the hue of my first complementary color. So when I mark the hue of red, I'm going to mark it as HR. And looking at my A1, and you can put yours anywhere you want as long as you put it in the same spot for all of them, I'm going to do the hue of my red right here, HR. And what I want you to do when you're illustrating these or when you're writing these down, you want to write very, very lightly with your pencil, because prior to painting any of these spaces, we need to go back through and erase the letters before we paint over the top. So I marked my hue of red in this spot of my A1. So now I've got to come to the same spot of my next A1, right? Hue of red. Same spot for the next A1, hue of red, and then fourth and final, hue of red. So I've used the hue of my RED. Now, the reason for this color chart, I'm going to cross through it diagonally. That way I know that I've already used that hue or that I've used that value. Next, I can move on to the hue of green. So one thing you got to decide is, do you want to put the hue of green in with the hue of red in that A1, or do you want to break out and put it in any one of these B1 spaces? For me, I'm actually going to try going with the B1. So I'm going to put my hue of green here, and then I'm going to come to the next B1, hue of green, and hue. Mark it off on here and then double check it. B1, good right here. B1, good. B1, good. B1, good. Perfect. Now I've got the tint of red. Since it seems like I've got red in my A's and green in my B's, I want there to be a little bit of both. So I want to have some green in with my red, and I want to have some red in with my green. So when I do the tint of red next, I'm actually going to put my tint right next to the hue of green. So to mark it, tint, you're going to put the T for tint right next to the R or the G or of whatever color you chose right next to it. Then I'll mark it off and move on to the next tint of green. Since I'm going to go with having them in both, maybe I'll put my tinted green right, let's go right here. Tint green. Then check that one off. And then I've got the shade of red next. So the shade's going to be the darker one. The tint is going to be the lighter one. I'm going to do my shaded red. Maybe I'll do my shaded red in here, in that really skinny sliver. Cross through the shaded red, and then I've got my shaded green last. And I can do shade green. Okay, so now I'm in kind of a pickle. I've used the hue, tint, and shade for both of my colors, but I still have 2 open spots left. Well, don't you worry, because you can repeat any hue, tint, and shade for either of those colors. So let's say I wanted to do my tint of red in this spot, next to the hue of red, the shade of red, and the tint of green. Well, if I put my tinted red right here, it's probably not going to be a great idea because this space shares a broadside right here with this tinted red. And so if I painted this one tinted red, then it's all going to look like one solid space, which, I mean, that shape looking kind of like a lightning bolt could be kind of cool, but I want to be able to see precise, visible separations between all of those. So tinted red, probably not going to be a great idea for me right here. What about my tinted green? Well, I don't have tinted green here sharing a broadside. I don't have it here or here sharing a broadside. It is right there, but it's not even close to this one. So I'm actually going to reuse tinted green in those same spaces. Then when I cross it off, I want to remind myself that I've used this particular value twice. So I'm going to cross through it the opposite direction. And then, let's see. Ooh, I could do my tinted red in here because it does come to a corner with this tinted red, but they don't share a broad side like it does with this shaded green. So I am okay to use my tinted red within those. So then use my tinted red twice. And even though I reused the tint for both, you could reuse the hue, you could reuse the shade, you could do the hue of one color and the shade of it. Really doesn't matter as long as they're not sharing broad sides next to each other. Now that layout's complete, before I go through, mix up, and paint those, I need to take and paint the hue, tint, and shade of my red here, then the hue, tint, and shade of my green right here.